One of the most controversial parts of the New Testament is what we could call a form of writing called apocalyptic. Now, we mentioned apocalyptic a little bit within the Tanakh, because really the apocalyptic within the Tanakh only happens towards the end of the writing. So in books like Zechariah and in books like Daniel. What we see is that in those books there's a sense of the future apocalypse. Now, apocalypse means the end things, or the things of the end. And so there's a concept of the end time, the day of judgment, the end of all things. And so apocalyptic is within Tanakh, but within the Newer Testament, we need to see that it's not quite as prevalent. There are some elements of it within some of the Gospels, particularly in Mark's Gospel, but really the book that we talk about when we think about apocalyptic is the book of the Revelation of John. And that book, of course, has been used by many, many people to actually identify when is the end times coming, when is the judgment day coming. Now, in a later module, we will be looking at the book of Revelation a bit more closely. But suffice to say now that, as we said about prophecy and about apocalyptic in the Tanakh, I want to say about apocalyptic in the New Testament as well. Is that even though apocalyptic might be looking forward to a time of judgment, a time of the end of all things, we need to be aware that that end of all things is not the point that the apocalyptic is trying to make. There is always still that same sense of the cyclical nature of time, that what has a beginning also has an end. But that end often isn't the end of everything, but rather heralds a new beginning. And we see that even in the book of Revelation, that in the book of Revelation where it's talking about the end, at the same time it begins to talk about also a new beginning. That in fact human beings wouldn't go and live in heaven, but in fact would live in a new earth. And so there's a sense of the cyclical nature of even that big cycle of life. From the beginning of all things to the judgment, the end of things, and then the recreation of all things into a new heaven and a new earth. And so the cycle begins again. Now, they didn't understand the concept of saying, well, in a certain year, in 2000 and whatever, and in fact, we're coming up in this year to a particular one, which is the 21st of December, 2012, so-called Mayan calendar, saying that that's the end of the world. And as we go towards it, people will start thinking, well, that's it, that's the end of everything. Well, the Jews would never really think in terms of that, because each day was its own cycle. Each day was its own connection. And in this day, we have to live as if this day is the last day. And if we do that, then we particularly may live in the framework of Jesus. We may live in the understanding of God. So apocalyptic, and particularly the book of Revelation, needs to be handled with great care. Because otherwise what we can allow ourselves to do is to become sidetracked with all this discussion about will people be left behind, and will the tribulation happen before Jesus comes, and will there be a time of 1,000 years of reign of Jesus? Will that happen before? In the end, we are living in the last days. Because in a sense, for each of us, every day is our last day. We don't have tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't exist yet. And so this could be the last day. And if this is the last day, how are we going to live in the love and in the care and in the relationship with God in this day? So when interpreting apocalyptic, please don't interpret it in terms of that future reality, but always take that future reality in terms of our present practicality. How do we live in this practical reality of today, rather than in this future prediction of what might happen? You need to remind yourself that the book of Revelation is written in the late part of the first century. And they were in the midst of a great amount of turmoil, both within the Roman Empire, within the Jewish Empire. You need to realize that in fact at 70 AD, the temple had been destroyed, Jerusalem had been destroyed. And all those concepts of destruction and death were part of the writing of the book of Revelation. Effectively, what John wanted to do as a pastor was to tell the people, watch out, because today may be your last day.